Oh, we're back for another one. Stay hydrated. COFOH Live Undead. I'm your host, Daniel Crosier. I almost said my guest's name, Tafetta Darling. Oh, but that is my guest tonight, the amazing Tafetta Darling. Ah!
Something on my face.
That is by far the best intro I've ever had. I'm really jealous. I want one of those. That's awesome.
What, the mask or just
everything? The enthusiasm, the like rock and roll music, the blood, all the monsters. I'm watching it and going, I don't even need to be here. That's awesome.
Wow. Well, thanks. Yeah, Tafetta, we're happy to have you. And thanks for joining us. We've got little power flickers going off. I don't know if you've noticed that. We're getting a little brownouts on this end because we're getting a lot of snow outside.
Oh, cool. I'm jealous of the snow. We just have kind of a cloudy, muggy, and kind of breezy right now in Dallas. I don't know when the last time we actually had really, really good snow. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Come on up. We'll share some.
I would love to go back to Denver. Like I was saying, it's been a while. And I think the first time I was actually in Denver was right around the time, we're just going to go, adult theme, that everything was like, legal. And I remember I got there and they were like, hey, what can you do? Or what would you like? And I was like, well, I hear this is legal now. And then 10 minutes later I had some and I was like, heck yeah, Denver. Heck yeah.
Yeah. How, is Texas even close to legalizing pot or anything like that?
I think right now we have something that's called like a mercy law or a mercy right or something like that, to where I just saw recently to where they're going to have people can apply to actually be a distributor or a grower. Ooh. But it has to be tied into, whatever this mercy umbrella is. And I think that may have something to do with like illnesses or being sick or what, but as greedy as Texas is, like, I'm really surprised that, we haven't gone full on yet for all the money.
Yeah. Hey, again, Tafetta, thanks for coming on. And, you're a comic book aficionado is how I would, describe you. Watching a lot of your, you're also a fellow podcaster, a superb one at that. You do your research. You're very knowledgeable about all the pop culture and everything from comic books to horror to superhero stuff and films and TV. Tell us a little.
My head growing this much right now. I'm not going to be able to fit outside my door. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm happy to feed it. Come, we give you more. But just wanted to bring you on and talk about horror comics and how they also like influence superhero genre, but also tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from and how you got into pop culture and comic books and all these fun things.
Oh man. Well, I guess I can go back to the very, my main start was back in the day. I kind of mentioned it earlier. When I was younger, like my treat at the end of every week, if I was good in school, I would go to 7-Eleven, I'd get a Slurpee and I'd get a little Archie comic, little Archie digest. And here I am, just getting that. Eventually, like I, grew out of the Archie. I didn't grow out of the Archie, but I moved from Archie to Sabrina, and I was like, cool, witches, I was like 10 years old, witches, I love witches. This is cool, and then started learning about vampires and monsters. And then I found, Werewolf by Night and the Legion of Monsters. Yeah. And then that was my intro to comics before, any of the other stuff was like, the Sabrina and then the monsters. And I didn't actually get into Batman until Batman the Animated Series and Batman 89 were kind of around. And I was like, cool, I love Batman. This guy's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, the origin story of, baby Taff and, my love for comics, I guess. But I remember being, 10, 11 years old, sneaking like the HBO or the Cinemax that were showing the horror movies late at night. My parents would go to sleep and I'd have this little TV and I'd go, watch Tales from the Crypt. And Tales from the Crypt was like a huge inspiration for me. I guess not inspiration, but a huge gateway into, just the horror in general. I was watching this late at night at HBO and, seeing more dicks, boobs, and death than I think I've ever seen as an adult. And just became, into it. And I think there's something fun about, kind of being scared, but knowing that it's not real, and it's a different sort of fantasy. We like the, the Conan fantasy. We like the, John Carter sci-fi, but with horror, it's a different kind of fantasy. I mean, like, obviously I don't want to die, but, there was just that thrill of being kind of like, whoo, that's a creepy guy, or that's a creepy monster, or this person just got decapitated, whoo, thank goodness it wasn't me.
Yeah, there's that adrenaline rush that kind of goes with it, and then sometimes, hopefully sometimes, more often than not, the humor that comes after that. It's like, oh, you got me, it's like, that sort of stuff. Especially with like something like Tales from the Crypt, which always had that tongue-in-cheek humor, that played along with it, and especially with the host himself, the puppet, just always the dirty dad jokes and stuff.
Right. John Crosier and his crazy voice. Let me move my mouse out of the way. I have a lot of cords over here. Sorry. There it goes. Okay. Perfect. My mouse is making way too much noise for me.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how you got into also like doing podcasting and broadcasting, because now you've got a new show on Twitch, right?
Yeah. Back in the day, I was, writing. I think it was right around the time actually when the Green Lantern movie came out with Ryan Reynolds, and I had this blog. It was called like Curves and Comics. Like, I mean, this is almost 20 years ago when it was like blogspot.com. It was very old school, and I was just writing shit to write shit and just put my thoughts out there. I guess for maybe posterity, just to have stuff, and somebody else kind of started reading it, and I would come be like guest on different stuff. Kind of got my own show, and it just kind of evolved from that. And I've been doing Facebook Live for maybe about 4 or 5 years, but really just kind of got tired of all the stuff that goes with Facebook and the algorithms and them wanting to pay and stuff. So I've stopped doing any of that, and now I'm doing everything strictly on Twitch, which once a week I do a gaming video where I just play a random game and have community chat, and then I have like an interview. So I stream twice a week, and then sometimes I'll have like a movie pizza party where I just drink and we just whatever talk and whatever happens. So it's still kind of the same brand and the same format, but it's just less of the BS that was going on with everything else.
Yeah, that's cool. So your introduction to comics, I mean, that was pretty interesting. Legion of Monsters, and followed by Sabrina. Is that right?
Well, Sabrina, and then like that's kind of when I started taking notice of like the other monsters that were around in the other comic books and stuff. And then with Tales from the Crypt, I really got into Johnny Craig, and then some of those books and stuff, and getting into the weird science and the tales of suspense stories and anything that went along with EC. I would say Graham Ingalls and Feldstein, just anything that tied to EC kind of just pushed it over the edge for me.
Right. Yeah. With like EC comics and especially some of the horror comics from like the 50s and stuff. Those were some of the things that led to that persecution of comics that that alleged, oh, this is the cause of the delinquency with youth, and they became that scapegoat. But it also became, kind of that, that forbidden fruit that, I think, gave comics their longevity so that they could, transition into other genres, and then be able to transition into superhero genre, which, really just kind of, that's what American comics are known for, right? The superhero genre.
Right.
Yeah. With with that, yeah, do you think that really directly influenced a lot of the like the superhero stuff that we consume today?
I think it definitely like has some like parallels to it, because I think at a time whenever like the comics code was getting slammed down, there were a lot of people who were leaving EC, and they were trying to figure out, people left EC, they went to DC, they went to Marvel, and they took those same stories but kind of tweaked them a little to where it wasn't necessarily like a decapitation cover, with someone punching Hitler, or maybe it wasn't a lady in bondage being attacked by monsters. Instead, it was a lady in bondage being attacked by Ku Klux Klan, and you had to get some of these other heroes to kind of come out and to kind of take the place of these monsters and ghouls. So I think there's definitely a connection there, and I think it's kind of like that old Scooby-Doo mantra at the end. It's always humans that are the actual monsters, and so it's interesting how the superhero genre has taken such dominance for so many years, but now I think just because of the movies and just because of cartoons that just have been bombarded by us, that now we're getting like this, resurgence of like, horror comics, and we're getting, the Werewolf by Night movie, which is fucking amazing, and then we're getting Moon Knight, we got the Moon Knight series, which is really cool. And then, we've got a little bit of hint of Blade and of all things, we get a hint of, Blade, and it's like, all right, cool. Give me the monsters, give me my gore, give me my, oogie boogies, bring it back.
Yeah. Most definitely. Famously too, like, you mentioned how so many of those stories kind of transitioned into, DC Comics, Marvel Comics stories. One thing that pops to mind is, famously, because of the comic book code, you can call Satan, in DC or Marvel. You instead, Marvel got Mephisto.
Right.
Yeah, I always thought that that was pretty interesting. It's like, oh, okay, just have the same stuff in there, just don't call it what what's labeled as a no.
Right. A lot of the sorcery and the witches and stuff like that was all kind of under the guise of astonishing tales. This is just an astonishing tale. It's not a suspense or a crime or a true crime tale or a horror tale. It's astonishing.
That's right. Yeah. It's always interesting, having those, just reinvent those taglines and those monikers, and then, you're free to go. It's just figuring out new ways around the rules. Yeah. How to bend them to those purposes.
Yes.
That's always a fun thing. And it's also like something that really plays well into, horror movies as well. You mentioned earlier, with people always being the bad guys, you get that so much in like contemporary tales like The Walking Dead, the comic book, and the TV series too. It's the zombies might set up the world, but at the end of the day, it's really us that are the most terrifying creatures.
Right. Or even more recently, I don't know if you've seen the Last of Us. It's now appearing on HBO.
Yeah.
Very much like Resident Evil. And it's funny because I was remembering, I was like, why didn't I ever play this game back when it came out? And I was like, oh yeah, because I was playing Resident Evil. They're very similar, but I can appreciate the the differences and the juxtaposition of of how it's all played out.
Right. Yeah, I did just catch the one episode. And I don't play video games. I'm usually sitting there drawing. I just never was a thing that really caught on with me, but watching that one episode, I was like, oh my god,
really
so
well done.
Yeah, and usually those type of adaptations, video game adaptations into film or TV, they're just not known for such depth. And then I did do a little bit of look up on the video game. And I was really surprised at just how in depth the video game, the story, in that really is too. Right. I think that was fantastic.
I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I hadn't played it, so I just kind of started looking. I was like, okay, well, I've spoiled myself, but I'm sure it's going to play out beautifully. So that'll be great.
Right. Oh, yeah. Looks like we got a couple of people commenting on this end.
Oh, where are they at? I don't see them.
Who is the best comic book monster of all time? That's my buddy Abram. What's your
like
what's
monster?
Comic book monster? What's your favorite, really?
Oh, my favorite is definitely Werewolf by Night, but I don't consider him necessarily like a monster. You know, he's just more kind of a cursed guy who's literally just trying to figure out what the hell happened to him and his family and just trying to get by. But I'm going to go with Dracula. I think Dracula is, he's bad through and through. There's not a time where Dracula is actually ever good in the comics, whether it be on the DC side, if he's fighting Batman in like Red Rain, or if he's in the Marvel side and he's going after, the Legion of Monsters. Or even if he's got like his kids, he's got, Lilith, there's just, Dracula's just kind of a badass. He's a baddie, he's just not good.
Nice. That's cool. And then looks like Trevor popped in here too. I think that's why a lot of collectors go after the pre-code horror books.
Okay. Yeah. I see the comments. Sorry. I had the volume up for a second, but I'm trying to pull this up so I can see what you guys are saying. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I work at Heritage in the comic department, and we just had a huge pre-code horror sale, and it was really neat to see a lot of these like mint comics that are we rarely that you rarely see. We got a lot of the Adventures in Darkness. We saw a lot of Alex Toth. We were able to see random Erwin Shapiro's and stuff that he's written. So it was a neat treat to see. And I think you're right. I think the people who do tend to go for those pre-horror or the pre-code is because they're a little bit less expensive than the superhero. But because I think they're getting so popular, I would imagine that they're going to wind up kind of
the value is going to go up.
The value is going to go up.
Nice. With something like that, I'd imagine too, like those along with the early superhero stuff, that mom and dad burned back in the early 50s or whatever.
Right.
Were also just almost as rare too.
Yeah, I think we had one collection that came in that almost everything was pretty much near mint, and that's always kind of neat to see because it had been something that just been kind of set aside and kind of forgotten about. But then I also like kind of seeing the ones that have been like really loved and worn, and you can tell that someone really enjoyed them back in the day.
Yeah, kind of hearing about like how thinking on like how mothers or parents were like burning kids as comic books. Like, I mean, I can't help but drop comparisons to not only censorship but also Nazi book burnings. I think that's a really unfortunate thing, and just kind of. And now you're starting to see some of that, today. Sorry to get political, but
I think comics are political though, and that's the kind of the thing. Sure. People get so upset and they get so mad. Oh well, Captain America's woke. Did you not fucking see the comic? Did you not read it where he punched Hitler? Well, Superman is woke. He's literally like he's like an alien from outer space. That's come here to do good, and he's being attacked and he's being sought after. I mean, like comics are political because I think. No matter how many times people want to separate them, like, political is just kind of in us, it's what makes us human because we have the ability to have that morality and the right and wrong. Right.
Well, and with that, I think that's what good art is. It's a reflection of, what the society norms, being reflected back at us. And it's like, oh, okay. These are the things hopefully we should address.
Right.
Yeah. It's definitely pretty interesting. Well, and then also with dealing with monsters and horror, monsters are a constant morality tale or an analogy for the outsider or somebody that's marginalized. You bring up Werewolf by Night being your favorite comic book monster, and you were saying that he's a kind of a tragic figure, dealing with this curse. You can't help but think of, that could be an analogy for, somebody that's, been marginalized, like, immigrants or refugees or something, trying to find their place in the world.
Right. I think also maybe, they have a really interesting way of tying to mental health as well, too. And people are dealing with like their own internal demons. They're dealing with their own internal struggles, Jack Russell for once, I just love that. I mean, but that was literally like what I fell in love with when I found out his name was Jack Russell.
Right.
Roy Thomas, you're fucking genius. You know, it's fucking
Yeah,
I love it. I love it.
yeah,
You know, but he doesn't want this. He doesn't want to have to deal with this, but it's something that's a part of him. So it's something he has to actually learn and grow with, and how to like control it, and how to deal with it in society, and how to have relationships with that. And I think mental health still kind of ties into that.
yeah, very much so. It's something that has been so stigmatized. It's so many people find it hard to talk about, but the more often we talk about it, the better we can address it.
Oh, absolutely. Like that's the one thing I will have no trouble talking about is like my own mental health issues, because like I grew up with, in that era where it was like, we don't talk about going to therapy. We don't talk about your issues, So I spent, 20 years of my life not knowing what was wrong with me. And then finally I went and saw someone like, oh, you have ADHD. You also have CPTSD. And it's like, oh, okay, well, now at least I know what I'm working with. So now I can manage it, much like Jack Russell. He finds out, oh, I've got this family curse. I'm a werewolf. Now I know what I'm doing.
Right.
I know what I have to work with.
Yeah. The, kind of hopping on the Werewolf by Night wagon, especially with the Halloween special. Oh my God. I was so surprised at how amazingly good that was, and how engaged I was with it.
I needed it longer. It was it wasn't enough for me at all.
Sure. No, I could totally see that. I do like the fact that it was like short and sweet. That is one of my criticisms on a number of these shows is sometimes it's too long drawn out, and it feels like filler, but this one was just kind of short to the point. And yeah, I can't wait for another installment of that. And
absolutely.
And then seeing somebody like Man-Thing,
right?
Who's one of my favorites. Like,
yeah.
Because
he's still, despite this grotesque, horrible, beast you see there deep down, he still wants to be called Ted. I'm still a person under all this monstrosity. Call me Ted.
Yeah, that's something I absolutely love with that interpretation of Man-Thing, and then like also like DC's Swamp Thing. I mean, I think Man-Thing came out like what, 2 months before or something like that. And
71. I can't think of when Swamp Thing was.
Yeah, I think it was like within months of each other.
Yeah,
and of course, I think it was wasn't it by the same because Lynn Wine have a hand in both?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So it was like, oh yeah, of course, that it makes total sense to similar or same creator, you had a hand in creating both.
Well, with Man-Thing, it was Roy Thomas, and it was Jerry Conroy, and then Gray Morrow. So it was really weird Morrow, because he was like this big, comic strip person, and so to see him go from like these, funny pages to creating this like crazy monster, this like humanoid,
right?
The evolution of that. But yeah, Roy Thomas, because he also did Werewolf by Night, and so that kind of makes sense why they kind of had their own little
have them intertwined.
Yeah.
I kept hearing that like Lynn Wine and wasn't it Roy Thomas, that weren't they roommates at one point?
I don't know, but I will go ahead and just say this. I actually am working on an interview with Roy Thomas, so I'll definitely ask that.
Nice.
He's
I don't know if I misheard that or what, but it's just like, oh yeah, they're so close in proximity of each other and type. But those are the two that I gravitate, that for me as a fan, those are the two I gravitate towards. And they're also, my two favorite characters that I love to draw. So, of course, I'm a sucker for lines, tons and tons of lines, thousands of lines.
The texture and the intricacies of it. Look, like someone said something over here. Let me see what
we got Trevor popped up again.
Around 12, I told my mom I started playing D&D with a friend, and she was a little taken back. Oh, look at that. I need to figure out what system you're using, because I'm reading this, and I don't have to read this. But what's funny is I was going to literally bring this up, because when you were talking about the book burnings and stuff like that,
right?
Like, my generation, it wasn't so much, or for me, it wasn't so much the book burning, but it was the satanic panic in the 80s with the D&D. Right. And that was something I was really wanting to. And my mom was like, we're from Guatemala. We're from a third world country. We don't deal with any of that stuff. And you know, conservative parents. So it was like, no, you know, I went to evangelical school for a few years.
Right.
So it was definitely off the table. But I really wish I had the opportunity to get into that when I was younger, because I probably would appreciate it more. But yeah, it's definitely every generation sort of has its own, you know, hysteria.
Right. Most definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Here in Colorado, like satanic panic was a big thing especially in Colorado Springs, because we have a massive, you know, Christian mega church community. And yeah, a lot of a lot of hippies got kind of you know, pigeonholed, you know, to be a part of, like, you know, Satanist cults and all this wild hysteria. And then you had a, you know, massive amount of you know, horror movies around the subject, you know, really, you know, kind of had that uptick. I mean, you had that in the 70s, but you really, you know, it was really noticeable in the 80s, you know, with the you know, horror film culture. It was an easy thing to play off of. Yeah, my girlfriend grew up you know, in Colorado Springs, and you know, really could speak to a lot of that, because she saw the hysteria. It was wild by her description.
I can definitely see how that is coming from, like, I guess even in the 70s, you have like these old like Hammer horror movies. You've got, you know, the Satanic Rites of Dracula, you know, you've got not just Dracula, you know, you've got Nestor, so you've got like all, you know, these Hammer horror movies that were just, you know, sexual and violent and just, you know, bloody. And so that was pretty much all the 70s. And so the 80s, when Reagan came in, they were like, no, we're going to say no to all that.
Right. That's true. The temperature certainly took a an amazing, you know, shift. To be, you know, very kind of that conservative authoritarianism aspect. Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. And then of course, you know, you remember like the Tom Hanks Dragnet movie with Dan Aykroyd.
Dan Aykroyd, yeah, the whole the pole and the goats and everything. Yeah, and I want to say that maybe one of the first times that I was kind of introduced to, you know, a more comical side of, you know, like Satanism and stuff like that, because I do remember that, and I remember that kind of scaring me, especially when they're about to, like, you know, sacrifice the girl and they throw her in the pit. You know, I was very young watching movies that I probably shouldn't have been, because I had you know, my dad really loved all these, you know, crazy movies, and that's where I get a lot of my love for all this random shit from is from him. And if they weren't there, like I said, I was usually just kind of sneaking shows, but I do remember Dragnet. It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, and then you know, Tom Hanks had that came later. I think it was 89, the Joe Dante film, The Burbs, which, you know, also, you know, played into that neighbor hysteria. It's like, you know, oh, what's your neighbor doing? The new person that moved in. Yeah, you know. What's that?
The Klopeks.
Yeah, that's right.
That's in my top 5 movies. You like literally can get me going on a tangent on that as well. Like The Burbs is anytime it's like July 4th or Memorial Day, you know, one of those holidays, I put that on, you know, because you've got the crazy neighbor. Satan is good. Satan is our friend.
Yeah.
You're chanting, Ray. Yeah.
That's awesome. That was I saw that it was on Netflix. I watched most of it the other day.
Yeah.
It's such a fun, you know, movie. But yeah, I guess Tom Hanks kind of had a satanic panic, you know, kind of series of films before he you know, became, you know, the nicest person everybody wants to, you know, knows in Hollywood, right?
Right. And then he kind of went full circle with the Dan Brown books and stuff whenever he came back, and he was like investigating the
the Da Vinci Code one, and then Angels and Demons.
What the hell is the place where they all congregate? No, the where the Pope lives.
Oh, Vatican City.
Yes. That was really hard for me. I'm gonna have to.
That's okay. That's okay. It's probably a place I'll never visit either.
I think I would visit just for the historical aspect of it, but probably wouldn't want to stay long. But yeah, so he did kind of like, you know, go from that to kind of coming back around with Angels and Demons. So if I ever interviewed him or met him, I would ask him about that and be like, so you like Satan?
Yeah. Well, in all of those, he's investigating all these like wrongdoings. I think what was it in Inferno with Ewan McGregor? That's like the only one I really sat through, and I think it was just the next in line to be Pope or something.
Yeah.
Turned out to be like committed murder and all that. So I was like, yeah. I don't know if it's anything to really do with like themes of demonic, but yeah, as far as like people doing evil things, again,
people are the monsters.
People are the monsters. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's a little more like, people monsters, more so than the Da Vinci Code, which I really like the Da Vinci Code. I can, get lost in like the Gnostic, verses and the tales of, Thomas and the whole, sangria, like the royal blood, and how like Mary was actually just like, transferred, and she made it all the way, and she had this pilgrimage, pilgrimage, and had a baby, and then that was the whole thing, and that's actually like, the Holy Grail. So I'm a sucker for that shit. So anyways, I'm way off topic from the horror stuff, but
oh no. But all that stuff, all that, like religious horror and everything, that plays into, so much of that. It's something that can be, used up as, morality tales. And really, you see, it's like, again, so much gets put on to like Satanists and stuff like that. Yeah, it's like, well, what if that's a morality tale? What if, they're really not that bad? Because I have a number of friends that are Satanists, and they have the better albums.
There's definitely like a fine line, I think, when you get into any sort of religion.
Right.
When you commit yourself to any sort of religion, I think once you've given yourself completely to one ideology, it becomes something people like, die and fight for. And for me, I tend to just kind of be more of an agnostic, to where I'm always willing to learn. I'm always wanting to learn, and I can obsess over this stuff and kind of, okay, well, now I've learned this. Well, what happened there? Let me keep going. So I've never quite committed to anything when it comes to an actual religion. But I think if I did, it would probably just be pop culture in general. Nice. I think that's the one thing that I can commit myself to is, reading these funny books and watching these horror movies and seeing how they, coalesce and kind of come together.
Right. Well, I think that's the nice thing too. It's like, you've got books out there like that feed, as the Bible or what have you. And so many people, try to enact so many of those commandments into law, but, with comic books, there's so many also fantastical things in there, but by no means do I want to enact any of that into law. It's like, just be glad that people are reading awesome stories, and stop forcing your will onto other people, especially if we don't adhere to them. Man, Trevor's really interacting with us tonight pretty well.
Trevor.
He works as a bartender at Alamo Draft House in Westminster, which is a suburb out here in Denver.
Okay.
Just watching the Burbs in the bar. Yeah, he just also gushing over it too.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher, and the rest of the cast, and it's a very good role for Tom Hanks, because he does get to play the good neighbor and the wholesome American Next Door, but then he also gets to play like that suspicious neighbor, and you just kind of see him go like up and down till the very end, to where he's about to apologize to all of them, and say sorry to the Klopeks, and then finds out he's right, that they actually are murderers.
Yep, that's true. That's
very
true.
good role for Tom Hanks. So yeah, if you guys haven't seen The Burbs in a long time, go see it. If you've never seen it, watch it now.
Definitely. See a young Bruce Stern. Holy cow!
I know, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just and then like Corey Feldman as well.
It's such a good cast. It's self-contained. It kind of goes up and down, like I said, from comedy to horror. So yeah, I'm glad you were able to watch it, Trevor. It's very good. I would say I'm just gonna shine some light on my show, because Creepshow is very much a comic book movie in its own way, in its own right, and I still think it's probably the best, if if not at least in the top 3 best anthology of horror movies, just because every tale in there, the way it's done like a comic book. It really kind of incorporates, like all the stories, how they interweave, and that is very much so like, the old EC comics and even like some of the stuff that came out before the EC comics.
Right. Have you been able to check out any of the new series on Shudder?
I have.
Yeah.
I actually paid for Shudder to watch that. The first season was kind of meh, but the next 2 were amazing. And I loved the one where they came in with Sam Raimi's brother. I can't think of his name. Where they did like the whole
Ted Raimi.
Yeah, where they kind of like, brought the Evil Dead back, and then they had this whole meta thing for where, it was very self-aware, where, this guy was like a collector of horror, props and, memorabilia. And it turns out, they had like the skeletons, and, they talked about the skeletons were actually real skeletons because it was cheaper just to find, old skeletons and like making them and stuff. I thought they did a really good job with that, and I hope they bring back more. It had that good feel of, creepy, spooky. And what I like about these stories is that they always get their, justice in the end.
Yeah.
Like no one gets away from the, from any of these, from these creeps.
That's right. The short stories are just so fantastic and wonderfully self-contained. Even as in comic books, there's so many amazing comic book anthology. So not only, back in the day, but also like right now, you get like a dozen of them trying to be funded on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or something. And they're amazing. You get these amazing new voices, trying to, demonstrate, some of their storytelling capabilities with these really accessible formats. And that's the beauty of like horror, is it's so accessible. It's also that forbidden fruit that you're not supposed to be watching when you're a kid, but you and I, we ignored that shit.
One of those things where your hands are covered, but you're still kind of peeking through one little finger. And you're like, I gotta watch.
Yeah. But it's such a great kind of ground to really start honing your craft too, and so many amazing storytellers and filmmakers start out in that genre and either move on to other things or really just sharpen their toolkit, getting these things going. Trevor, you are just going to town writing a book. I love it.
Appreciate it, Trevor.
Comics have been great in the last decade because there are so many new stories being told, more than just Marvel and DC. The indie publishers are really bringing their game. Mm-hmm. Some of the horror titles in particular, it's like, I would totally agree. Not even like necessarily just indie labels, but just guys at home, putting their works on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and that's their audience,
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think there's even some mainstream ones. I don't know if you guys read James Tynion. He had Something is Killing Children. He did like the DC versus vampires. He had the Nice House on the Lake. So he does a really good job of like, he's in the mainstream and he's, part of, DC, but he still brings that horror and he still kind of brings that suspense. And, Scott Snyder there for a while before he was Batman. Like he was a horror writer, he was magnificent with Swamp Thing, and that was pretty creepy. So I think that there's still room for, some of these mainstream publishers to have some of these comic kind of spooky and scary.
Right. I really enjoyed his run on Swamp Thing. Didn't he do that with Yannick Papier? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was I remember that series. I think I collected the whole run. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so epic and big. I was hoping that at some point those themes would just roll over into the rest of DC and not just get the next Crisis or the next Green Lantern crossover, but also really play with the red and the green, and how they affect the rest of the intergalactic.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely I wanted a lot more, and I didn't really read a whole lot of Swamp Thing. I'm familiar with him. I did a little bit of
Yeah,
a Hellblazer and Constantine. I know the
right,
Swamp Thing ties in with that, but I didn't really get into Swamp Thing until pretty much Scott Snyder was writing it, and that's because he had written some other stuff that I was kind of a fan of before.
right.
And it's just kind of neat to kind of see how some of these brains work. Like, oh, I can write a really good Batman story, but I can also write this story that's really going to be creepy and scare you.
Right. Right. Yeah. With like superheroes, like, getting to somebody like with Batman who works off of fear, right? That's why he wears the costume and everything like that. Being able to play off of, scary, spooky horror themes, within that, I think that, that lends itself to a lot more accessible, but also, creative potential for storytelling,
Right.
you know, whereas, maybe Superman, he has his limitations there. But then you start seeing that in like, as far as DC goes, obviously Swamp Thing, is kind of gothic horror, and as well as body horror, um,
Romance.
and romance, gothic romance too.
He weaves that in. So yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to see all these, like different genres and how they can really inform how things go. On the Marvel side, I've always been a fan of like Ghost Rider. It's like just that. I mean, as a kid, the visual, right? The flaming skull.
Right. That's pretty fucking scary.
That is, yeah. And then, like it's only been in the last few years. It's like, holy crap, he's an Avenger now. What? Like, of course. Why wasn't he before? It's like, how cool is that? You
Yeah.
know?
He was hanging out with the actual monsters, with his legion of monsters.
Yeah, yeah.
He had to kind of do his little, his little song and dance over here to be like superhero.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, with like supernatural characters, like dabbling in magic, like Doctor Strange and Doctor Fate and those guys. It's like, well, yeah, that's you got to have those guys on your team because they can deal with the unthinkable threats. And of course with that, does come the horror characters or the ones more rooted in that. But I mean, they're all have their elements of magic base. Even like somebody that's cursed, like Werewolf by Night, or Blade that has to deal with Dracula so much. Is like it's not a bad idea to have them on your team.
Yeah, it's that cosmic horror. You've got the Avengers who are dealing with like the threats on Earth or like the alien threats, but they haven't dealt with anything that's like, cosmic horror yet, but once you bring in the Sorcerer Supreme, it's like, let me go ahead and just kind of fill you in on what is beyond these realms. And then like, oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not just dealing with gods, but gods are also kind of, dealing with magic and monsters and stuff too. They're always connected with that. The Norse gods have all their mythology and supernatural. Hela is a good example of that. I mean, technically, so is Thor, but they've kind of I don't know, kind of polished him up enough to where it's maybe not so much, but it's just more widely acceptable. But there is that supernatural element that at least comes from the actual Norse mythology, right?
Yeah, exactly. And some of that's actually pretty scary too. So
yeah. Well, yeah. What is it? Was it with Ragnarok? Is it the end serpent or something like that, or is it the wolf that brings about the end of the world? I can't remember all that stuff, but it's absolutely ridiculous and exciting. And I think we got a little glimpse of that in the movie. You got that giant wolf, right?
Yeah, you'll bet that, and you've got like the actual like demon that's been buried underneath. And I think with Doctor Strange, he's got more Lovecraftian monsters and boogeyman.
Yes.
In Thor, you've got more like mythology, which is still also creepy in its own way. But when you've got like a giant wolf as compared to Doctor Strange is whatever is going to get him. It's going to come out in some like cosmic horror. There's definitely like a difference in the terror. For me, I feel like I would be running towards a giant wolf and being like, "Oh, puppy!" But then I'd be running away, from some of these like giant serpents and these, crazy monsters. Because I don't want any of that, but I kind of want that big puppy.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Yeah. It's fluffy, but when it sheds, man, oh my God, that's the worst. Like,
it was worth it.
Yeah. The dander, so much dander. With something like that too, like cosmic horror. Thinking on like Doctor Strange. Yeah, I think that would be more appropriately alien than just the things that you would see in traditionally in comic books when you have like your Final Crisis or your Infinity Gauntlet stuff,
right?
Going on. Is those things of actual unknown unknowns. It's like, you go and you see like, was it the Living Tribunal in Marvel Comics, but these are all like personifications with humanoid bodies. It's like, what about the powers and energies behind them that you shouldn't be able to define. Not by human standards. Yeah, obviously that's where your Doctor Stranges come in. Who are used to dealing with abstract.
Yeah.
Those
like Dormammu, like this is literally just like, a giant flaming being from the cosmos.
Yeah.
It's pure energy of, scariness. And that's his giant monster he's got to deal with. And I'm glad we got just a little bit of that in his movie. I thought that was actually really fun.
Yeah. What was that? Surtur? Is that right?
Which one is it?
Are we? You mean in Multiverse of Madness?
I think it was in the first Doctor Strange. Remember whenever? I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Dormammu.
Dormammu. Yeah.
Yeah, I know these names.
I read things. I don't hear them.
Yeah, that's true. Well, like with Black Panther, when they had Namor come out, I was like, I was always saying it Namor.
It's Namor. If you're from Texas, I say Namor. But like, when he was like, it's Namor because he's obviously very romantic.
Yeah. Okay.
Like Amor, but it's Namor.
I was like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. I'll take that.
Namor.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Let's see here. We got Trevor kicking in. And I'll add that it's exciting to fund some of these projects on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. And then he's got talking about Aftershock comics too. If any of you get a chance to check out I Breathed a Body by Aftershocks Comics, it's sort of a mix of Akira meets the Social Network. Oh wow.
Crazy. Okay.
That's pretty cool.
I thought that was kind of I thought it was a good movie. I was entertained by it.
Yes, Social Network is fantastic. Akira, the manga and the anime too. Well, for me, I grew up with the anime, so I mean, that's another thing of like body horror by itself too. I don't know if have you been able to check that out, Akira?
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with it. I was actually just kind of writing a note here to go check out I Breathe the Body because that seems kind of interesting because I like both of those things.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen Akira. I think maybe I saw it once when I was younger. Unfortunately, my anime knowledge is limited to like anything between 85 and like 98. I think I stopped after Ninja Scroll and Vampire Hunter D. That was kind of it. After that, I was like, I don't know, I'm out.
Right. That's and that's pretty much my knowledge too. Is like the Akiras, Ghost in the Shell. Ninja Scroll was that was one that I would come home from working at Blockbuster Video and just pop in and chill out watching that one.
I mean, and that's scary itself. Also, it's
right.
Very like creepy and weirdly done. And God, I think I didn't see that till maybe I was like 16 or 17, and it had been out for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, the like recently that I think that when it comes to anime and manga, the one that I gravitate towards is Attack on Titan or Attack of Titan. Yeah, the anime is just amazing. I remember I got into that. This is funny. I had just come home from eating I think some udon or something like that, and I have a nut allergy,
Oh yeah.
and something got contaminated, and I was throwing up for the rest of the day. So I just
That's a good memory. That's a good tie into both of them.
yeah. So all I could do, I couldn't keep anything down. All I could do was just sit there and watch TV, and Attack on Titan was just on Netflix. And so I streamed that the entire day, just watching that, trying to recover. And I was like, holy crap, everything's subtitled. I couldn't, but yeah, I got the gist. I was like, man, this is amazing. And then, by that night I was fine, but yeah, if I didn't cripple myself, I wouldn't have caught that.
I'll definitely have to thank Trevor here for the suggestion.
Yeah, most definitely. Tafetta, we're just about out of time, but real quick, can you recommend like a Werewolf by Night run, or any comic book series that horror related that you're currently really enjoying?
I'm so far behind on anything that's modern. So I would just be pulling, stuff from back in the day, but I would definitely start, if you are looking to get into horror, I would go straight to EC. I would go to Tales of Suspense. I would go to Shot Suspense Stories. I would go to Cryptid Terror. If you wanted to go to Pre-Code, I would do, Tales of Adventures in Darkness, Adventures of Terror, Terror Tales, anything that's got, the Johnny Craig. He did a lot of the art, but he also wrote a lot of the stories too. You've got Graham Ingalls. I would definitely, I would start with the beginning. I would start with those.
Yeah, that's cool. Man, that's awesome. Tafetta, thanks for coming on, and
thank you.
Being so generous with your time, and talking comics and horror comics with me. It also opens up my eyes too, because I'm always wanting to learn more, but again, I'm a little dense. It's always busy doing other stuff to really.
Or even the Journey into Mystery before we got Thor, because we got Thor in Journey into Mystery, and that was like, I think like in the 80s issues, but even like the early Journey into Mystery, the Marvel, like in 1951, 52, those were also, very like spooky kind of like, true crime stuff. So you can go back to Marvel Pre-Code, and you can find a lot of, anthology issues that just have random horror stories in there too.
Oh, that's awesome. That's cool. And remember, everybody who's tuning in after the show ends, make sure you go to Twitch .tv /Tafetta Darling, and make sure you subscribe and follow her, and support amazing talents like her, doing some really fun stuff. You're going to be doing interviews and playing video games and chatting it up. And what other things are you doing on your Twitch channel?
Well, I can just plug a couple of my guests. Next week, I'm playing a couple of horror games. I've downloaded some stuff that are kind of interactive, that are kind of like role playing. So I've got that I'm playing. But I've got Jamie Koala, and she's an amazing artist. She does these like life-size like death metal prints, and she does like artwork for like heavy metal bands, but she's also a fashion designer, and so she has like this beautiful like clothing line of like fantasy stuff, but then you like see her art, and it's all like hardcore death metal. She's super awesome. And then I'm actually talking to Doug Jones, the actor Doug Jones.
That's awesome. That's so sweet.
I don't even know, but I'm talking to Doug Jones on January the 30th. Before that, I'll be chatting with if you're into punk music, if you're into indie music, the guy who was in Bash Giordani, he was in Squirt Gun, he's in Screech and Weasel and Kamen Rider, but he also does producing for Anti-Flag, Rise Against, and Alkaline Trio. So I'll be chatting with him. And then I've got some people from the Animaniacs season that's coming up, and I've got some local bands, singers from Dallas that are coming up that are about to go on tour that have new albums out too. So next month is going to be heavily focused on
a lot of music.
But
Yeah.
next couple of weeks, I'm going to have some pretty cool like celebrity and artist guests. So I
Cool.
don't know how it happened, but I'm really thankful for it.
That's awesome. Well, that's fantastic. We'll make sure. Yeah, we'll make sure to tune in then and check it out.
We have one last comment here. It says Teen Wolf is the best werewolf story. Sorry, I had to say it. It's debatable, but
Thanks,
I appreciate you,
Brandon. I guess.
That's my partner. That's my Brandon.
Oh, is that your Brandon? Oh, you can argue with that when you get offline.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me come chat. Like I said, I can rant for hours on this stuff. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, we'll have to have you back sometime and we'll rant some more.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks so much. Hang out for a few minutes while we sign off. But again, to everybody that tuned in, thanks so much for all your support and tuning in. And of course, to our sponsors, to Mutiny Information Cafe. If you're going to start a revolution, make sure you're caffeinated. And our friends at Hellfire Entertainment, thanks for rebroadcasting this on your social media. And of course, Groovy TV. And our friends over at Alien Donut Films, to Bill and Angela over there. And
I love all your gadgets. This is so fun.
oh, thanks. And then of course to my producers, Lily Fisher and Amanda Armstrong and Stefan Santa Cruz. And we're still getting more comments. That's right, Mutiny for Life. Nice. He's from here. That's awesome. And yeah, to everybody that tuned in, hey, it's snowing outside, so help each other out during these cold times. And we'll catch you next week. Next week, I'm interviewing the guys from The Empty Crypt, so another local podcast. So we get to geek out on more horror stuff. It'll be fun. So take care, take it easy. Happy New Year. We'll see you